Hey, welcome to Everfree Radio. This is AutumnSpice.
I'm Brushin Bones.
And I'm Crescendo.
And today we are going to be reviewing the fanon-crushing, canon-creating episode, Hearth's Warming Eve.
Now, Hearth's Warming Eve is a tale of the main six, as we know them, putting on a play for the festival, the celebration holiday, Hearth's Warming Eve, which celebrates the founding of Equestria. They all play characters in the play, and Spike gives us the narration, and we get a story that's told in both segments of the characters we all know and love acting on a stage for a crowd, and also sequences that are done in flashback. And it tells us the tale of the kingdom before it was Equestria, as we all know and love it, when it was divided into three different societies: unicorns, Pegasi, and Earth Ponies. There's no mention of Princess Celestia and no mention of Discord, so we can assume that this all took place in a time before either of them came into the picture.
It does make you wonder how far back the history actually goes, because obviously, with us knowing now that Equestria was founded, not made, and then the ponies came to there, but now we know they came from a different land to begin with. So how far back does the history go?
And the ponies that did come from the faraway land, I think they were depicted very well by the main cast. I think that it was very cool that they all fit their role perfectly. You had Rarity as the prissy princess, you had Twilight as the smart advisor, you had Applejack as the grounded and
well-meaning secretary.
Yes, the well-meaning secretary that always had snarky remarks. It was very funny, actually.
Because she was secretary to Pinkie Pie.
Exactly. She was secretary to Pinkie Pie. I think all the roles were really well done. You had Rainbow Dash as the angry general, and Fluttershy as the quiet private. It was all really well done.
Indeed, I agree. Now, one thing that you mentioned when you introduced us and the episode was that it was fanon-crushing and canon-creating. As far as canon creating goes, this is the episode that has decisively solidified the concept of Equestria as a country rather than an entire world. And that is sure to make a few waves in the fandom, I'm sure.
There already were a few where they were speaking about different countries, different nations. There's even a very popular map of Equestria that's around on DA that has like the place where the Diamond Dogs came from, things like that. So now this is going to become a lot more commonplace in the fanon because of this episode.
Indeed, indeed. Now, throughout the sequence of the play and the tale of the founding, we have the scenes where Spike, as the narrator, informs us all that basically the way that the ponies were working together in the past was that the Pegasi would control the weather so that the Earth ponies could grow food, and in exchange, the Earth ponies would give portions of their food to the Pegasi, and the unicorns would use their unicorn magic to bring up the sun and the moon to make night and day, so that they could all have comfortable lives, pretty much. And they also took a portion of the food that the Earth ponies were growing. Now, that being said, eventually some dissension started to occur when the land they were living in suddenly had a blizzard hit. Now, since I am going into detail, I'm going to give you a kind of a late spoiler warning, as this review, being that it is an analysis, will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode yet, you're advised to do so.
It's a fantastic episode, to be sure.
Well worth it.
Now, because of the blizzard coming in, the ponies are having more difficulty growing the food, and so the Earth ponies are keeping more of the food to themselves, which of course ticks off the Pegasi and the unicorns. And so it eventually devolves into a big, kind of like a war between the three different societies over who is the most important and who should be getting more food. And basically, people are pointing fingers, well, metaphorically speaking, figuratively speaking, there's a lot of finger pointing going on, and trying to accuse others and place the blame on others for why there's less food. And it eventually all just devolves into the leaders of the three societies all deciding individually that they're going to find a new land.
Too bad for them that the bad weather followed them, because it was actually their fighting that caused the bad weather. Also, speaking of the growing of the plants by the earth ponies, I found it very interesting that we finally got to see they can magically grow food. When Applejack picked up the soil, a sprout just kind of burst out of there.
I'm kind of iffy about that, just because I think it might have been used for a kind of a comedic or dramatic effect, because she mentions how fertile the ground is, and the growing plant is kind of just showing, hey, this ground is really fertile. I don't even have to work to get a plant to grow.
You could say they did have an easy task to clear the ground to plant those tiny seeds.
I see what you did there. I do believe that it could be interpreted either way, because we have been told before that earth ponies do have their own kind of magic. So this could be that they were using it for a comedic effect, but they're going to make the fandom freak out and think, oh, magic that we were seeing or hearing about.
It's also quite possible that the magic effect of the plant growing was just in the play itself and not actually what happened.
And that being said, when they each all find this new land, of course, the new land is a lovely place, and it's untouched by the bad weather that they've been having in their old land. But unfortunately, all three of the leaders of the individual societies have discovered the same land, so they begin fighting over that land. And then we are shown the reveal, which is basically that snow spirits that they refer to as Wendigo, although they look nothing like the Wendigo of actual folklore, so don't bother looking that up. These snow spirits are basically harnessing the power of their enmity and their hatred and using it to create an everlasting winter and freeze the lands as frozen as their hearts are. And eventually, as we're given info showing that the underlings to the leaders, played by Fluttershy, Applejack, and Twilight, are not at all happy with the way that their leaders are handling things, and so we're kind of given and foreshadowing that they're going to be the ones to kind of fix the problems, and of course they do.
I do think the roles chosen for Rainbow, Pinkie, and Rarity are well done, with Rarity being the overdramatic, very high-end queen type, and Rainbow being the very commanding general character, and of course Pinkie just being mad.
Pinkie was great.
Well, anybody with the name Chancellor Puddinhead is probably going to be a little bit crazy. Now, admittedly, that being said, they are very, very well chosen, and of course, their underlings match them very well.
I'm not going to be the one to inspire any of this, so don't point at me, but I do think that there's going to be a lot of ship fics from this.
More likely than not, there's probably going to be quite a few. Oh, not to mention the surefire likelihood of lots of fan art being drawn of Rarity riding on Twilight's back.
I cringed when that happened. I was like, you have no idea what you just opened the floodgates to. Ugh.
Yeah.
I just think we might, and one piece of art I wouldn't mind seeing more of is Pinkie Pie popping out of Rarity's hat at the beginning.
That was great.
It does seem kind of odd for Rarity to be wearing that hat, though it seems a little tacky for Rarity.
Oh, the things she does for show business.
And don't forget that something that might be tacky to one fashion sensibility is completely fashionable to another person's sensibilities.
Yeah, remember the hat she gave to Apple Bloom?
Or not to mention, if you've ever seen any of the images of the type of stuff that's in French haute couture, then you probably know that fashions aren't always the most understandable.
True enough. Also, it's nice to see that we actually get the train in an episode rather than just in the title sequence, because it did feel odd that suddenly there's a train in the middle of Ponyville.
I saw it coming. It's because there's a train toy set. They needed to incorporate it into the show, and they did a pretty good job with it.
Although we must mention now, and I'm going to bring up a lovely little example here, the demotivational image that was made on Pony Buru after this episode aired was Ponyville. Sometimes we fuel our trains, because the last time we saw a train in Over a Barrel, it was pulled by ponies, and this one was not.
Yeah. I wonder what makes them decide whether to fuel them or not.
Maybe the train in Over a Barrel just broke down a couple of minutes into the journey, and they didn't want to go back.
Perhaps. Now, that all being said, the episode ends on a pretty predictable note. Basically, the Wendigos start freezing everything because the groups continue to fight as they basically try to escape the blizzard by running into a cave. Rainbow Dash, Pinky, and Rarity wind up frozen because they're the ones doing most of the fighting, which basically gives an opportunity for their underlings, Twilight, Applejack, and Fluttershy, to basically get to know one another and express the fact that they don't really hate one another, and in all honesty, they might even dislike the people they're working with more than them, but that they're all ponies in the long run, and that there's plenty of similarity there. And of course, that gives them the opportunity to start sharing stories, and the warmth of friendship basically melts the ice of enmity. And
then Twilight goes Super Saiyan.
Yeah, Twilight goes Super Saiyan.
Which, as cheesy as it sounds, is actually quite fitting. The warmth of friendship.
Well, yeah, you get to see... I thought it was really cute how they had a giant fiery heart.
The heart seemed like... The way that the heart was colored and the way that it pulsed reminded me a lot of the ending to every episode of the Powerpuff Girls, with the heart signal behind the Powerpuff Girls backdrop.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh yeah, and if my memory serves correctly, Lauren Faust also did Powerpuff Girls.
She worked. She was part of the staff that did Powerpuff Girls. The Powerpuff Girls was actually created by her husband, Craig McCracken, and coincidentally enough, Tara Strong, the voice of Twilight Sparkle, is also the voice of the Powerpuff Girl Bubbles.
To be fair, Tara does a lot of work. She does it well, though, which I can't blame people for hiring her for.
Now, the way that the episode ends, of course, shows us all basically we got the whole gist of Equestria, and then they end with a song that's sung in chorus. And I've got to say that as far as songs go, this is probably the weakest song in the whole series so far, because since it is sung in chorus by not only all of the members of the main six, but also all the members of the audience, it makes the song hard to understand and hard to really get into, especially since it's a very short, brief song at the end of the play before the episode ends. So it's probably the weakest musical number.
You do have to look at it from the point of view, though. It's a very fitting song for Christmas. It's pretty much...
That's what I was just thinking.
It's pretty much what we'd expect of one of our Christmas carols.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's kind of like... it's
Absolutely.
pretty much, exactly like a nativity scene in real life, when people hold a play for the nativity, which of course is Christianity, the birth of Christ, which most people celebrate Christmas for. Christmas is a celebration of the birth of Christ, so when the nativity play is over, they usually sing the song Hark, the Herald Angel Sings. I believe that's what the title of the song is. This is Hark, the Herald Angel Sings, glory to the newborn king.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, that being the case, and please don't take my singing to the, don't take that as an example of my best singing, please.
Don't worry, Bones, it's on the internet now, it's gonna be everywhere.
But yeah, I got the feeling that the whole founding of Equestria and Hearthswarming Eve was very much supposed to be kind of like Equestria's version of like a nativity scene. It's what Hearthswarming Eve, which is the equivalent of their Christmas, that's what it's all about, is the founding of Equestria was based in the roots of friendship, and the song is meant to represent that at the end, but it doesn't stop it from being overall a weak song because there's little to appreciate from it. A lot of it just kind of becomes white noise because so many people are singing at once.
It would be nice just to hear a version with just the main six singing it then.
That'd be wonderful.
Indeed, it would be wonderful. Now, all that said, if you were to break down this episode, what would you say were strongest and weakest points? I myself would probably say that this episode's strongest point was in finally basically giving us some backstory, but at the same time, I'd say its weakest point was the fact that it didn't incorporate Celestia, Luna, or even Discord into it, so now we're going to have to be left to guess how those characters wound up in the positions they are, because Celestia mentioned Discord was ruler of Equestria before her and Luna were.
Well, it's also possible that we'll get a future episode about that. We don't know what's coming ahead, of course.
My theory is, and I'm not sure if this is really a popular theory, I haven't looked at any of the theories that have come out of this episode just yet. They chose Celestia and Luna as rulers because they have traits of all three pony races.
It's quite possible, but you kind of have to wonder what their origins were, and so I'm kind of hoping that we'll get something that'll reveal how Celestia and Luna came into being if there were no alicorns in the past. Now, that being said, the strongest feature of this was, of course, the fact that it gave us some backstory into how Equestria was founded. It did answer the question of, is Equestria the entire planet, or is Equestria just a single country? But once again, the good goes hand in hand with the bad, in that, in all honesty, and this may just be my personal opinion, I felt that them having Equestria be simply a country rather than the world as its entirety opens up an entirely different can of worms that, in regards to the logic about it. Now, admittedly, it's a show for kids. The primary demographic is, 6-year-old little girls who aren't going to think this in depth about it. But if Equestria is simply a country, what do the other countries have to say about the fact that the ruler of a completely separate country has control over the sun and the moon? Now, that being said, in all honesty, it would take me hours to say all of the things that I have a problem with in regards to this episode, so perhaps I'll list that off in a minicast one of these days. Leave a comment if you're interested in hearing my opinions on that. But my overall score would probably be a 3.5, and that's just because to me, 3.5 ranks in at about average. It's a 70% if you do the math, a C grade, and that's just because while it answered some questions, it provided us with more questions than answers. The characters were enjoyable, but they're always enjoyable. There wasn't anything particularly out of character about them. The setup was good, but wasn't awe-inspiring, and the song was lackluster. In all honesty, I feel that the song was kind of unnecessary, and the fact that they included it as it was, with it basically being little more than choral white noise, it did more harm than good, in my opinion, so I give it about a 3.5.
In my opinion, I want to rate it higher than that, because I did enjoy the episode. I thought it was definitely a good episode. But I agree, it was very cut and dry. But that doesn't detract from the enjoyability for me. I especially liked the fact with how it switched between the play and, as if it were the real thing. And it also makes me wonder how they got that much room.
If I were to give it a rating of any sort, I would have to mark it down as well, just because if we're comparing this to the other episodes, everything is good so far. All of the episodes have been great, but comparatively speaking, I'd probably give it a 3 or a 3.5, just because it is very cut and dry. But even though they left room and basically had more questions come up than the answers, I think that's going to really stimulate the fan base.
Well, it might stimulate the fan base. I kind of have issue with that, just because I don't like having more questions than there are answers, I mean, and stimulating the fandom isn't a bad thing, but pretty much there's a difference between good stimulation and bad stimulation this is the kind of thing that's going to bring up fanon wars, in my opinion. It's the kind of thing that's going to make people start arguing what's more plausible, and that's kind of where I go with that.
On the topic of fanon wars, I think as long as it's all constructive fighting, which of course it will not be, and fighting's not constructive, so I guess constructive arguing, I think it would be a good thing because it'll keep the fan base thinking, making new artwork, making new stories that are interesting, new theories. It's always a double-edged sword, if you ask me, because our fan base is pretty relaxed, but when it comes to fanon, that's probably the topic of which we stray the most from the whole love and tolerance thing, because everybody has their own idea, and they love their idea, and oh my gosh, I would hate it if my idea was changed.
True. And I mean, when it comes to giving us more questions than answers, it's kind of like when they provided the answer of like, how did they bring up the sun and the moon before Luna, sort of thing. You know, when Discord wasn't around, they explained that the unicorns brought up the sun and the moon, but they don't tell us how many unicorns were needed.
That's what I was thinking too.
They don't tell us whether or not there was like a committee of like 9 unicorns who used their magic to bring up the sun and the moon. They didn't tell us if there was just one really powerful unicorn. Like, they mentioned Star Swirl the Bearded in an offhand remark that Twilight Sparkle's character makes about being mentored by Star Swirl the Bearded, but they never say like if specifically a single powerful pony was the one who raised the sun and the moon, or if every unicorn ever has to use their power at the same time in order to raise the sun and the moon each day. And it's those kinds of questions that the fandom is going to wind up asking, and it's those types of questions that are going to wind up creating big, like, flame wars and stuff like that, and with people shouting, well, I think this, and then another person shouting, well, you're wrong because of this assumption.
I'd say this is a pretty good episode, but I hesitate to rate it higher than Bones, really. Just for the fact that he's right. It feels very cut and dry. That doesn't detract from the enjoyment for me, but as I say, it's what will cause me to rate it the 3.5 I'm about to give it. But the most enjoyable part for me, I'd have to say, would be the fact that it was like the way it went from being a play to being a real thing that we saw. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
The like flashback sequences.
Yes.
That was enjoyable. I found that was very stylistic, so that kind of helped it in the long run for my review. Mm-hmm. But not enough to give it above 3.5. Anyway, that about wraps it up then. You heard it here. Autumn gave it a 3 to a 3.5, so roughly in between. We can just level it out at 3.25. And then me and Crescendo gave it a 3.5, so that's about a 3.5 average. So basically, that's where you got it. It's good. It's not great, but it's good, and it is enjoyable enough that you should definitely watch it, if only to learn exactly, as Pinky would say, how Equestria was made.
And together, they named their new land Equestria!
So, that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I'm Brushin' Bones.
I'm Crescendo.
I'm AutumnSpice.
And we'll get back to you next time here at Everfree Radio. Stay tuned.